Howdy, folks. Got some notes today I'll be referring to because this is a lengthy topic. Wanted to talk to you about some terms and concepts related to the same thing, autism. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about an understanding of ASD as it relates to the DSM 5 here in America versus a neurodivergent understanding of autism. But first, HSP, highly sensitive person, the work of Dr. Elaine Aron. I read that book several years ago. Without being too wordy, it's good information. It's a good perspective. It's a nice, gentle, eye opening experience to the world of mental health and neurodivergence. I found it very useful. I even got my dad to admit that, hey, that kind of sounds like his experience growing up. But the utility of that concept only goes so far. She stops at kind of look at how great HSPs are and how much they bring to the world. Doesn't really delve into the hard meat and potatoes of how do you exist in a world that's not made for you. Nothing against her. I love her work, but I've moved on from that. Asperger's is a term that we have now moved beyond. The new DSM 5 just rolls Asperger's under the autism spectrum, but you shouldn't get that word out of your vocabulary yet, because if you are diagnosed as level 1 autism or referred to as high functioning autism, or likely if you're late diagnosed autism, like 45 years old like me, a lot of the information that will be useful to you is still archived under Asperger's when you look it up. That will be the most useful information for you right now. So, autism spectrum disorder. I like it. I like the acronym. I like the word autism. I like the category of it. I don't mind being labeled autistic. I find it very useful. The words I have written here on the page are it provides a framework for understanding and expectations and individual support needs. And that's what I like most about it. It's concrete, black and white, something I can sink my teeth into and actually use. Yeah, there's lots of varying opinions. People don't like labels. People don't like being called names. I don't have a problem with it. Quite honestly, I need the structure and predictability in my life. I want to be able to look something up and say, okay, I fall under this category. The utility for me is I can read what's been written then about that category, and it might open my eyes to other aspects of my life or my lived experience that I wouldn't have connected to. Oh, that's also related to my autism. What wisdom and insight can I find to help me better deal with that part of my life? I also think that a professional framework like this, in some instances, legal definition, helps in structuring conversations and advocating for support needs, whether it be self-advocating or someone who's a caregiver advocating for support needs. So, like advocating for what my kids might need in school to help them learn. Which brings us to the last term, neurodivergence. And again, not the broad use of the term, but the use of it as it's applied to autistic folks. I'm going to probably catch a little flack for this, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. To me, it sounds a little bit like, no, it sounds a lot like everybody gets a prize. And I have seen things like we're all a little autistic kind of get lumped into this. We're all neurodivergent. We're all unique, special little flowers. Look, we are all individuals. I don't deny that at all. But a category that includes everybody isn't a category. And it's not very useful, my personal opinion. More specifically, what I think it does is it removes agency from the individual and their support structure. To me, it kind of swallows you up into groupthink. And I've already said, a category that everyone falls under isn't a category at all. On the surface, it sounds nice and bohemian. Like we all accept each other, we all are part of this group, we're all a little crazy, but like we've already got that. We're all humans, and each human is a unique individual. And what I don't like is taken in the limit or taken in the extreme, the group think structure ends up being the tyranny of mob rule. And if I get any hate comments telling me you don't understand neurodivergence, you're not one of us, or whatever might show up in the comments, I offer that as proof. I am autistic, and I don't like the neurodivergent thing. I'm not trying to convince you that the word neurodivergence isn't useful, and that I think accepting the fact that you are neurodivergent and understanding that the group of people out there who also are neurodivergent is probably far larger than you imagine, I think that is very, very useful. You're not alone. I just don't like some of the limit cases that term gets applied to. How about that? I want to transition now to one of those limit cases. And I cringe to use the adjective toxic because I think it gets way overused, but you understand what I'm saying when I say toxic positivity. I think we all kind of get what that means right now. I was introduced to the term toxic positivity in the comments of one of my videos. It was an early video I made discovering my autism, and it involved me welding up a pot hanger in the garage and just kind of reflecting, brainstorming about autism. I had just begun to explore the topic. And the commenter thanked me for not having another positive video about autism. It caused me to pause and reflect about how we talk about the topic of autism. I think there's a tendency, I think it's just a human tendency, to be positive about most things, especially difficult things, and to try to find the good side or the positive side of something. I worry that leaves folks to suffer in silence with all the negative things. And in the spirit of radical acceptance, which I've talked about in a lot of different places, I think it's good that we talk about the negative aspects of being autistic too, without whining, maybe. I mean, that has its place. Everyone has to grieve, but to just be honest about all aspects of it. My notes get a little sporadic here. I have a lot to feel about this topic, and I'm trying to have something intelligent to say about it, so appreciate you bearing with me as we go through this. Maybe a better term for it would be hyperpositivity about autism. One of the hyperpositive things I've seen regarding discussing autism is the phrase, autism is my superpower. I call baloney on that one. If that was so, then I would be a highly successful leading member of society. Mostly because I am autistic, and I've always wanted to be a highly successful leading member of society. And I've done a lot of things that should lead me on that path. I have lots of accomplishments to my credit, but I'm not there. And as far as I can tell, the reason I'm not there, trying to realistically control for life and chance and all that stuff, effort, is that autism got in my way. And specifically, it was unrealized autism. I wasn't aware of my limitations, and I pushed beyond what I can reasonably be expected to do. And that resulted in burnout and failure and having to relearn who I am at midlife. I don't hate the phrase autism is my superpower, but I think it properly belongs on either a cute motivational poster or like on a t-shirt that you wear when you want to go out and have a good time and be positive about yourself. And admittedly, there are aspects of my autism that I have come to value. The thing is, I can't change my autism. I can't therapy my way out of it. I can't hard work my way out of it. And so being mindful of the positive things that you have with your autism helps you cope, helps you live life, helps you accept yourself. The second phrase I've seen running around a little bit that I have a problem with is we're all a little autistic. And I've seen a lot of folks that also take exception to that. No, we're not all a little autistic. Where this comes from is certain behaviors or symptoms are common across humanity. For example, masking, putting on a good face in a social situation to behave well, meet expectations, that kind of a thing. Certainly, all humans do that. But the frequency and impact of those behaviors or symptoms and how that impacts your lived experience, that's what matters for autistic folks. So going back to we all mask sometimes. Yes, autistic folks mask most of the time, and it would actually be more accurate to say that autistics unmask sometimes. And that's the difference. We all mask sometimes. Yes, absolutely true. Well, autistics unmask sometimes. And so they spend the bulk of their life masking, trying to fit in because they don't understand and they have a hard time functioning in the normal world. You could say that we all struggle with relationships sometimes. Well, autistic folks struggle with relationships all the time. And as far as lived experience goes, and that's what really does count, autistic folks regularly fail to achieve their relationship goals, despite performing tasks or doing friendship really well. And so the phrase, we're all a little autistic, I've heard it described as abhorrent, and I tend to agree with that. I'm not going to get militant about it, but no, we don't need that. We need to recognize the struggles people have and accept them, not just wash them into make an excuse of like, oh, we're just all a little that way. It'll be okay. Just toughen up. I'm not going to pay attention to you. It's uncomfortable for me to hear and consider you, so I'm going to excuse it. Not useful. So going back to toxic positivity or hyper positivity, I think is probably a better term. I understand the attempt to be positive about traits that you can't control and to look at them in a different light instead of being negative all the time. I think balance is what's called for here, though. We must balance the positive things we see in ourselves as autistics with how difficult life is for us. And just to reflect a little more broadly on this hyper positivity, maybe the positivity about autism is an attempt to sell autism to neurotypical folks. And I'm not sure that's going to end well. There could definitely be buyer's remorse, and it could be very vicious and maybe even worse than ignorance. Like right now, if you're ignorant of autism, you might, as a neurotypical person, you might just look and say, well, you're a little weird, or why do you do that crazy thing, or what's wrong with you? That's hard. Might be a little painful, especially if it happens for years and years and years and no one understands, maybe including yourself, like me. I didn't understand. But if I hype up my autism superpowers and we're all a little autistic and it's all this great thing, and then I have a meltdown, or I throw something across the room, or some of the really negative aspects of behavior that is common to autistic folks manifests without warning, and I've sold it as a hyper positive thing, like that can be really detrimental to relationships. That could be seen as lying or leading someone on. And so, again, I think honesty about all aspects of our experience is what's called for. What I have written here at the end is we are lauded for being good at honesty. So just do that. Advocate and learn to love yourself. Well, I think I did a pretty good job of taking feelings and turning them into thoughts and then words. Hopefully it's come across well here in the video. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Have you heard of HSP, highly sensitive person? What do you think of the Asperger's term? Anybody diagnosed as that when they were younger and now realize that, okay, it's all been rolled into the autism spectrum under the DSM-5? How do you feel about that? What do y'all think about the autism spectrum? And especially, like, it's a really broad spectrum when it comes to, well, if I say it from the neurotypical perspective, support needs. If I say it from the autistic perspective, from lived experience, it's a really broad spectrum. What do you think about the term neurodivergence? How useful do you think that is as a way to understand autism? I think it's a good term to have a broad category of many things that fall under not normal brain. But what I'm asking about here is specific to kind of a how do you understand autism? Let's just call it neurodivergence. And what do you think about hyperpositivity? I mean, you could apply that to any topic, but I'm asking about, and especially from my autistic folks, how has hyperpositivity impacted your experience, your life? Folks, I hope that you're doing well. I still am exploring autism. For a couple of years now, I've been ignoring any co-occurring neurodivergent things with myself. But I think if I'm being honest, I need to start looking into ADHD. Yeah, there's always more to discover and understand. Take care. Remember, hope is a choice.